I have to ask you this, and we're kind of jumping, all over the place here, but I really want to talk mindset for a second with you, KG, because again, I really like the way that you kind of break things down. I think very thoughtful way that you present things. I tuned into about 20 to 30 minutes of that space that you did. It was a couple Sundays ago. And I don't know who the other guy was, but it was you and him for like the first 25 minutes were just talking about like price and where, mindset of everybody right now. And I found it, like a grounding, good conversation. It was very calm, which you don't really find in crypto anywhere. So that's appreciated. And then I saw your video here on Twitter the other day where you were talking about like what actually is success. And I don't think that is, I think some people hear that and it's like this, they might look at that as the starting of like, oh, are you moving the goalposts on us now? Like I'm not supposed to have the dreams that I did before. I didn't look at it that way. I'm not, maybe I'm making that up. Maybe nobody thought that, but I found that video was about 4 minutes, like really refreshing because it was talking about what do you actually deem success? Because we're in this culture right now that it is, we've got smartphones. Everybody has, every social media app and everything, and you can see everything that everybody else is doing. And on one hand, it's fantastic that like three guys like us that are like-minded can sit here and communicate in this way, which we never would have been able to, 30 years ago or whatever. But now I can see how Andrew Tate allegedly lives. I can see how like all these people lives and these crazy lifestyles they have, and they're telling young men that they have to do this and have to do that to be successful. And I thought you made a great video because you were saying like, hey, you literally said one of my interests. You were like, hey, maybe an interest for you is like just being out in a cabin in the woods and you're happy, And I think that's really interesting, and it's healthy for people to hear that right now, especially when prices are down and they don't know how long this crypto journey is going to last. Is like, what is your actual definition of success? So I was wondering if you could like expound a little bit on those points and tell us specifically how that's helped you over the years, because you obviously have done work to like cultivate that. You weren't just born thinking that way. I mean, especially with all that we're subjected to right now, like I just said, it's very hard to rewire yourself that way when you see all these other people having massive success. So whatever direction you want to take it there, I'm just really interested on your thought process on all that.
Well, first of all, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about these things. I enjoy talking about crypto. I love crypto, but at the foundation of who I am as a person and you could argue my greatest passion is comparative philosophy and religion, just because I think those three big questions that no human being has ever been able to answer. And we've been talking about it since human beings could talk. Where did we come from? What are we doing here? Where are we going? This whole bookshelf.
Yeah.
That's what all those books are behind me. So I think it is very important for people to hear that message. And it's not me moving the goalpost. It's actually me exposing another side of myself that's always been here that maybe I've been a little more nervous to share, because I mean, I could have used other language too in that video, which I'm glad you liked and appreciate that. But there's even some language that I might start to use that they might say, is KG on, is he on some other type of drugs? We need to check in on him. But, so I want to build up to like really saying the things that I want to say. And, you might call it the spiritual, the mindset realm. But so it's always been a part of me. It's just coming out. It's not new. But reason why I was inspired to share that message is because I do see a lot of people, and myself too, a lot of content you'll see me tweet about or videos I make, it's actually messages to myself. I'm speaking to myself. So it helps me to reflect on and articulate things out. But it actually came a part of my life when I was getting my real estate license about 8 years ago at this point. And I was working at Pizza Hut. I was working at this other restaurant being a waiter. And I was introduced to this book called Think and Grow Rich. If you haven't read the book or even listened to the audiobook, that's how I read it, was via audiobook. And then this is another little thing. You can get absolute inspiration, wisdom from the most unlikely places. If you've seen The Matrix, there's Morpheus in the movie. A Morpheus for me was a dishwasher at the restaurant. The guy that nobody would pay attention to, this guy completely pulled me out, because I had been introduced to Think and Grow Rich, but he had already read it. He was already way deep down that rabbit hole. And maybe he wasn't, you could argue, he wasn't applying it because he was a dishwasher, but he was the happiest person that I interacted with. Every time I had a new crazy idea, he had already thought about it for years before me. He was an older guy. So that, and this is all leading up to a point. Thank you. Apologies for the longer answer. But point being is that people get stuck in these ideas of, I've got to have a lot of money. And so they stress and they're depressed. When in reality, that is you, maybe that is what would make you happy or feel successful. But at the end of it, only you know what would make you happy and feel successful. And as long as you're embarking upon those things, I think you are a successful person. And following those things is what led me here to crypto. It was scary to be a crypto project founder. I had a successful real estate business that I'd been building for 7 years, and year over year, I was making more money. When I walked away from real estate to start this crypto endeavor was my highest producing year as a human being ever. I had never made more money than I did that year in real estate. And I walked away to put all my attention on a thing that was completely risky. I didn't know if it would work, but all I knew is that I was inspired and driven, and it felt like rather than me trying to create it, I was being pulled towards it. And so whether or not it was successful, which it is, I felt successful by going after it.
That's really interesting that you had the cojones, I guess I would say, to leave what you were previously doing to start the crypto journey. And I think that's one thing that you can gain, like you were talking about reading Think and Grow Rich. And I totally, that point you made about the dishwasher resonates with me too, because I've met many like wise older people at strange,
Right.
like, you know what I mean? Like
I do.
you wouldn't, like, I would not expect to see you here. But that's really interesting because it gives you that, everybody I think has to look inward to like really figure out what it is they want, where they're going to go, and what goals you want to go after and what things you want to pursue. And you had the foresight to get into crypto and stuff like that because you were true to yourself. You knew that you wanted more and stuff like that. And I think that's what people have to do. And I think right now, not to just like dumb it down to like just the markets and crypto and prices going up and down and stuff like that. But when you see people's confidence shaken so strongly, I mean, they could just be over leveraged, but also
Sure.
That's part of not having a plan to begin with, I think. And that could be the whole way from, what you're saying down to like a spiritual or goal level or whatever it is, or literally just an investment thesis of some sort. Like people just don't have maybe a plan, 1, 2, 3, 5, 10-year plan to go after. And I think that might be why we see this capitulation left and right and drama all over Twitter all the time. I hope that Ewok and I on this show try to be, a calm voice among a lot of the things that are going on. And I hope, outlets like you and I would value you for sure doing continued spaces or doing little videos like that if it's easier for you. But I hope those are outlets that will help people kind of like calm down and realize how to actually go about this stuff. I don't know if you have any other points. I just really found like you broke down the definition of success, which I thought was really interesting too. And I don't know if you could repeat that here if you remember it, or like how people may want to use that to look at it differently to kind of, get their mindset correct.
Sure. Yeah. So that definition of success that I talked about in that video was actually by a man, Earl Nightingale, which is interesting. A lot of this self-help philosophy comes from the early 1900s, which those guys were in the Great Depression, and it spawned self-help. I mean, It's just interesting how humanity works. So anyways, he said, Earl Nightingale said, success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. And on the onset, it's like, what? And I keep thinking about that for all these years, and it continues to, expose itself in new ways. And basically what I take from that is, so you have a progressive realization where realization, okay, bear with me for a moment. So the suffix ization means to create or to make real, to bring into life. So a realization is a creating, bringing to life of a real thing. So the progressive realization is the continual bringing to life, right? You're not poofing magic into existence. You are working towards and bringing something to life. It's progressive. It's continual. There's no end date, right? Really, people who often experience the phenomenon of success don't stop when they get there. There is no there, so to speak, right? So, and then the progressive realization, that's the first part, of a worthy ideal. This is where all of humanity argues. Because worthy, I bet if the three of us took time to explain what we thought something that is worthy is, we would all have maybe we'd agree on some stuff, but we'd all have its own nuances. And so that's why I like to use the example of, Jeff Bezos in Amazon mega whatever. And then you have Henry David Thoreau, who's an old author, and he lived back in the 1850s-ish. Anyways, complete hippie kind of guy, lived in the woods in the cabin, but was resonating with people at Harvard of the time. He was one of the intellectuals of his time period, but he wanted to have nothing. That was success to him, is have as little as possible and be as in tune with nature as possible. So most people would look at him and say he was a bum. He wasn't successful. And they'll look at Jeff Bezos and say Jeff Bezos is successful. But Thoreau deemed worthiness as minimalism, and Bezos deems worthiness as the opposite of that. All the things, literally. Right. I want to get it to you by a drone. So it is up to the person to decide what is worthy of spending their time working towards creating it. And that's what that, definition, in my opinion, ultimately means. And the biggest thing people struggle with is they get scared, which is totally normal. Bob Proctor actually talks about this concept of the terror barrier, that people approach this barrier ready to blast into their dreams. And it's a decision that they either bounce back into their old bad habits that are holding them down, or they blast through it, right? So it's this concept of terror barrier. Most people get hit with that and go back because it's their family, their friends, their partners, their own insecurities. They say, nah, just be safe. You can't do it. You can't be successful. That's not what you're supposed to do. And then they go back, and then most people just live miserable and depressed. And, so it is scary to pursue your dreams. And especially because you're putting yourself out there and you're thinking, what if people don't accept it? So I think that ultimately answers your question of breaking down that definition. I wish I could say it in less words, but it's hard to do that.
No, matter of fact, you spawned some Earl Nightingale love in the chat. So that is
there we go.
Yeah.